time in court. We are reading through the Delphi trial transcript, and this is the state's case part 28. We're on Lieutenant Jerry Holman's testimony right now. He is with the Indiana State Police, and he was one of the leads in this case, or one of the unified command. So he was in the know about everything going on in this case. Um, and right now, he's testifying to the interview with Richard Allen and also because he interviewed Allen and then he was the one that eventually arrested him. And we just learned that he had no intentions of arresting Allen that day, even though, according to him, he had this foolproof evidence that the bullet was cycled through Richard Allen's gun. But yeah, he didn't want to arrest him that day. He had no intention of arresting him until Richard Allen continued to deny and say things that a normal innocent person would say, in my opinion. But that was suspicious to Jerry Holman. So that's where we're at. We went on a break. We just started cross examination, and Andy Baldwin, I believe, is doing it, if I remember correctly. And we just went on a break. The jury left and took a 15-minute break, and now we're back on the record. So let's get started. Please hit that like button. So again, Lieutenant Jerry Holman with the Indiana State Police, Andy Baldwin on cross. Judge, I did weed out a lot of questions, but there are some questions that I think they're appropriate, but I do not want to run afoul of the court. So I can kind of say that they are very quickly, and I can kind of say what they are very quickly and want to see if the state would have issues with them. The court says, oh, okay, based on the motion in limine. Okay, says the court. Would that be okay? Sure. Okay. Mr. McClellan says, do we do it here, Judge? Do you want to do a sidebar? She says, I don't care. Or he says, I don't care, Judge. And she said, Baldwin says, doesn't matter to me. She says, we should do a sidebar. Okay. Okay, just bring all your stuff, says the court. Sidebar conducted. They're primarily about, says Mr. Baldwin. See, I put warning. The court says warning. Mr. Baldwin says, so, oh, there's no data on Rick's phone at the time of the cult or of the occult. Do what? Say it again? There's no data on Rick's phone, or it could be his computers or anything that tied him to cults or the occult. Mr. McClellan says, I would object to that. The court says, yeah, that doesn't, he's not accused of that. Mr. Baldwin says, okay. And then this might be short. Oh, Holman, Lieutenant Holman said that he believed that somebody was assisting Richard by setting up the meeting. Mr. McClellan says, I don't honestly have a problem with it. Mr. Baldwin says, okay. McClellan says, as long as it's outside, as long as I can clean it up. The court says, sure. McClellan says, on redirect. Court says, on redirect, that's fine. McClellan says, yeah. Baldwin says, okay, so that came in. I'll have to do this at an offer of proof later. The court says, that's fine. Mr. Baldwin says, no connection of Rick Allen to any other person of interest. You're worried about Keegan Klein, you're worried. Mr. McClellan says, I think that it's getting dangerously close to. Mr. Baldwin says, okay, this one, trying to be lawyering here a little bit. Any social media on his electronics that connected him to tree branch sticks arranged in specific configurations. The court says, that's fine. I mean, that came up in somebody's direct. Was it crime scene? Probably. Yeah, I don't know, because you were trying to ask questions about the sticks. And we have our first inaudible from the judge, no less, of all people, that the court reporter can't decipher. Mr. McClellan says, so your question is anything on social media dealing with, Mr. Baldwin says, that's connected to. Mr. McClellan says, say it again, sorry. Any social media on Richard Richard's electronics that connected him to tree branches or sticks arranged in specific configurations. And of course, McClelland has a problem. He says, my issue with that is that it's kind of implying that the arrangements has to indicate something that runs afoul of the motion in limine. That's my thoughts. Bailiff says, folks in the gallery, please keep it down. They're trying to have a sidebar over there and they're picking up our conversation or your conversation. Mr. McClellan says, it doesn't give a chance to clean it up unless I get into. Mr. Baldwin says, yeah. Mr. McClellan says, the cults and stuff. Mr. Baldwin says, it's fine. That's fine. You know what? I don't want this. I don't want to. The court says, we can because, we'll have to revisit some of the issues based on the motion that you filed. But do they? Does she ever change any of her rulings? Of course not. Mr. McClellan says, correct. Mr. Baldwin says, okay. And Mr. McClellan says, and so I think based on whatever she rules, it's your call. You're going to call him again on your case in chief, right? Probably, yeah. So it sounds like the defense might be calling Lieutenant Holman again. Mr. McClellan says, then you can ask him those questions. Baldwin says, okay. Mr. McClellan says, but I'd ask to say I'm not the ruler here, but I'd ask to focus on his interview with Richard Allen. Baldwin says, okay, the only thing that he did say at the end that I arrested him because I felt that the facts that had established probable cause. I felt there were facts that had established probable cause. That's why I'm going to go through this stuff. And I do talk about, at the top of it, a little bit more about his interview here. But if you don't think that at the end of that, when Lieutenant Holman said that doesn't allow me to get into other aspects of the investigation up to only to his arrest, then I won't get into those. But I felt like it did, because he said I had probable cause based upon the facts. Court says, and I don't have a problem with that. Mr. Baldwin says, okay. Court says, other than the things we've already discussed. Baldwin says, yeah. Court says that we don't need to discuss again. Mr. Baldwin says, I'm sure there's other things in here, but I will preview them. Obviously, I'm nervous. I don't want to get run afoul of you at all. Like, do you see how afraid he is of this judge now? Because of the whole garbage that went on beforehand. So, if you're not familiar or if you forgot, Judge Goal in the pretrial conferences and things, she kicked them off the case unexpectedly and without real cause. And in fact, it was overturned by the Indiana uh, appeals, the Court of Appeals. So um, they were brought back onto the case, and I really think that tarnished the relationship between the attorneys and the judge because he's so timid. Like, nobody wants to push back on this judge. Do you see? Like, I see it. I've seen it since we started this case, since we started doing this, reading through these testimonies here. It's very obvious to me that anytime the judge kind of is thinking one way or leaning one way, they're like, I don't want to upset the judge. So they're very hesitant to even push back. And unfortunately, the person who gets hurt here is Richard Allen because he doesn't get an effective defense. He doesn't get an effective uh, set of counsel who can push back for his rights because they're too afraid to, apparently. I don't know. I would be too. She's terrifying, but you got to fight for your client here. So, where was I? Okay, so just kind of set it to the side. Baldwin says, okay. The court says, because you're going to have an opportunity at some point to either make an offer of proof or ask those questions. Baldwin says, okay. Court says, okay. Baldwin says, okay, thank you, Judge. Appreciate it. Mr. McClellan says, thank you, Judge. Sidebar conference concluded. The court says, okay, with that conversation, then, uh, are we ready to bring the jury back in and continue with your cross? Mr. Baldwin says, I am, Judge. Court says, okay, gentlemen. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, may we approach while we're waiting for the jury? She says, yeah. And we have another sidebar conference. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, with the questions about that he's gonna ask him about other people involved or something, that question, can I at least warn the witness not to talk about the stuff? Court says yes. In the motion in limine. Court says yes. It's not stuff that I did on direct. Mr. McClellan said, Mr. Baldwin says, I might just avoid it. I just won't ask that question. How's that? Court says, okay. Mr. So, see what I mean? Like, he's just like, okay, I'm just not going to ask it. Forget it. Like, why wouldn't you let him warn the witness not to get into a certain thing? Maybe he just didn't want him talking to the witness because maybe he didn't trust him talking to the witness, which I don't totally um, disagree with because I wouldn't trust Nicholas McLeland as far as I could throw him, which is not at all. So, yeah, I would say maybe he just didn't trust him talking to a witness that was already sworn in and on the stand. So that would be my guess there. But I would have rather brought it in front of the jury and risk that risk it. Just I guess just risk it because I think that it's more important that the jury knows some of these things that they're just like, oh, okay, we're just not going to get into it. So then you don't have as strong of a defense. Anyways, Mr. McClellan says, I just don't want him to blurt out something. Court says, okay. That opens the door. Baldwin says, we can figure it out later. Court says, okay. Baldwin says, I won't ask. Mr. McClellan says, I appreciate that. Mr. Baldwin says, why risk it is what I say. Why risk it? He just doesn't want to risk it, yet you're risking Alan going to prison by not necessarily bringing it all in. Well, I mean, I know that they don't want to, he doesn't want to make the court mad. He doesn't want to teeter on that line of, is this third party culprit? Because he was specifically told, they were specifically told that they cannot bring that in. So he's being very careful, which I think is too careful when right here they were given an opportunity to bring it in. And he's like, you know what? Never mind. It's, not a big deal. Only my client going to prison for 130 years. Sorry, I really like Andy Baldwin, but I'm seeing some cracks in the defense here. The court says, okay, yeah, that's fine. Baldwin says, okay, thank you. Sidebar conference concluded. The bailiff says, all rise. Thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. You may continue continue, Mr. Baldwin. He says, thank you. And he asks, on direct examination, you had talked about one lie that you had told Richard Allen during the course of your interrogation. Is that right? Yes. And that lie was, what was that lie? I think there was two lies. I think I told him that there was witnesses that saw him on the trail and that experts saw him or said that they saw him and his voice. There were multiple others. So he lied multiple times. Okay. So, and whenever you said told him those lies, he said I didn't. He still said I didn't do this? That's correct. So even though you lied to him, he still denied it. Even though you told him these lies about an expert matching his voice and seeing him or whatever you're saying. Let me see if there was other. You even told him I'm not lying to you about anything, didn't you? I did. Wow. But you were lying to him. I was. And you even said It would be unethical for me to lie to you. No, I don't think I said unethical. If I had a transcript of that interrogation and handed that to you, would that refresh your recollection? No. Straight up no. Nope. I'm not going to look at it. No. If you said I said unethical, I'll agree to it. I'm not lying to you, Rick. That's unethical. It would be unethical for me to lie to you. Doesn't sound like something I would normally say, but yeah. I don't normally tell people it's unethical for me to lie to them when I have a practice of normally lying to them. So you trust that? I trust that, the transcript. Okay. You told him that the prosecutor and other investigators want to, quote, lock you up and throw away the key. You told him that? I did. And he still said, I didn't do this? Correct. You realize the death penalty is on the table. You told him that? I did. And he still said, I didn't do this? He actually said, I don't care. Kill me. I want to die anyway. Something to that effect. I guess we'll see it next week as they play the video in court the following week. Okay, yeah, it's on the video. And then at one point in time, when you said you talked about a moment in when it got ratcheted up and there was cussing between one another. Yes. And one of those was, you're going to drag your effing wife. But you didn't say effing, did you? No. You said, you're going to drag your effing wife and your daughter through this because you're too effing bullheaded to get out in front of this and admit you made a mistake. You said that to him? I did. So at that point in time, you put into Richard Allen's head the notion that his wife and daughter were going to suffer because he was accused of this crime. I don't know what I thought. Mr. McLeland says, objection to speculation, Judge. I don't know that he can testify as to what in Richard Allen's mind, what was in Richard Allen's head at that point. Sustained. It was was it? It must have been important for you then to in order to get a confession out of Richard Allen to put his wife and daughter into play. Hey, they're going to suffer unless you confess. McClelland says, Judge, may I ask a few foundational questions? Yes. I think the question was phrased, then it must be. It was important to you to get a confession out of Richard Allen. Is the tactic you used something you learned through your training and experience? Yes, the read technique, which guarantees almost maybe like 80% of the time you get a confession, probably more. And why were you using those tactics with Richard Allen? To elicit responses and get a confession. So we wanted a confession. Mr. McLuhan says, okay, I don't have any other questions, Judge. I withdraw my objection. So part of the way, this is Baldwin again, so part of the way that you were trying to elicit a confession, as you just said, was to leverage his wife and daughter and say they're going to suffer unless you confess. That's basically what you're saying. No, that was not my intention. But it is very manipulative. You're going to drag your effing wife and your daughter through this because you're too effing bullheaded to get out in front of it and admit you made a mistake. That's what you said. That's what I said. Okay. And the rest of the jury, I won't go through it. The jury can see that next week. Court says, okay. So you were here a couple days ago when there was a jury question that asked Mr. Mullen, were you in an interview in which Richard Allen said he did not know which day he drove that day? Or which car? It should be car. Were you here when that question was asked? Yes. And Mullen's question was yes, or answer was yes? I don't remember. Okay. That was not true, though, is it? You watched that interview. Richard Allen never said that he didn't know which way he drove. He said he drove from town. Oh, it should be way, not day. Which way he drove? Not which car. Sorry. So you watched that interview. Richard Allen never said he didn't know which way he drove. He said he drove from town towards Monon High Bridge. I think he said there was multiple ways he would have went, but I don't know if it. Well, just let the jury watch that. Yeah, says the witness. Before you conducted Rick's second interview on October 26th, remember the first one's October 13th, and by the 26th, you had learned from Melissa Oberg certain information that between those two dates. Is that correct? At some point I did, yes. Had you learned between October 13th and the 26th that Ms. Oberg had compared the unspent shell found on the ground to a fired shell out of Rick's gun? No, I did not. Okay. Were you aware of whether Ms. Oberg had utilized the consecutive matching striation objective tool to determine if Oberg was even correct? No. I just went off the certificate of analysis. I don't know how they test it. And in those 2 weeks, from the 13th till the 26th, you did not send that unspent casing to an independent examiner not affiliated with the state police or the state of Indiana to determine whether Melissa Oberg was correct or possibly wrong in her analysis? No, we did not. You test, was it you or Mullins, that and I don't know why. I always say Mullins. I don't mean to be respectful. Is he a detective? Do you know that he's Steve Mullins? Steve Mullins? Inspector for the prosecutor. So Inspector Mullins. Yeah, Inspector Mullins. Who was it that said yesterday that Rick said it's over? I did. Did you testify? I did. I don't remember, says Baldwin. He says, yeah. And you said that you did not tape record it. I did not. But he was in your squad car? Yes. Now the funny thing is, though, on October 13th, after Richard Allen left the interview room, somebody from law enforcement drove him back to his house. Do you remember that? I believe so, yes. And that was tape recorded. The in-car drive from the station to his house, that was tape recorded, wasn't it? It was. But you didn't tape record this statement that you claim that he made? He says he made it in the interview. Okay. We'll let the jury see. Okay. So maybe there's some conflicting statements or what the state is saying, their narrative on what Alan is saying or when he's saying things. And what he was basically saying to you, according to your direct examination, is hey, it's over. Everybody believes that I did this. The neighbors see it. That's what he was talking about. He said, it doesn't matter. It's over. I don't know what he meant, but in his interview, he explains it. And I understand what you said a minute ago or a second ago that you claim, but the video will speak for itself. That Richard Allen told you what you said and it's over. But I want to focus on it isn't recorded. Why isn't it recorded? You didn't record the one that when his house was being searched, and you claim that he said this, right? No, I did not. And that was in your car again, correct? Part of it. Okay. Part of it was walking around. Oh, okay, there. Really? You did not say that on direct. You said Richard Allen sat in your car while they searched his home, and that's when this conversation took place. But now he's saying part of it was walking around. Well, still, why don't you have a body worn camera on? You should have your cruise camera on. Like all of those things should be recording in full. You're in an investigation. You're on duty. You're with a potential suspect. Those things should be recording. Why weren't they? Also, when Richard Allen left on October 26th, when he left in handcuffs, that was tape recorded in the vehicle as well, right? I believe so. I believe they put a tape recorder in my pocket. And you find Betsy Blair to be credible? I do. And you were aware at the time that you said on direct examination that there was probable cause to arrest Richard Allen. You were aware that Betsy Blair had described a vehicle that did not look like Richard Allen's car at the CPS lot when it was supposed to be Richard's car, right? Mr. McLeland says, Judge, a little bit of foundational questions here. Do you know whether or not Betsy Blair was describing Richard Allen's car? No. So, Judge, I'm going to object to speculation about him being able to testify as to whose car Betsy Blair was describing. Mr. Baldwin says, I can ask a different way. Sustained. So, Richard Allen's car, for your theory to be correct, Richard Allen's car was at the CPS lot at 1:30. No, that's not correct. For my theory to be correct, I don't know what you mean. Well, okay. Well, I'll ratchet it back a step. Your theory is Richard Allen's vehicle was at the CPS lot at 1:30. That's not my theory. No. I don't know where he parked. I know he drove by the Hoosier Harvest store. Where he parked, I don't know. Okay, but the state's theory is that he parked there. So you believe that he drove? We have witnesses. That's your belief. We have witnesses saying they saw a vehicle matching the description, some of them. You have witnesses. Who are these witnesses? Go ahead, tell me. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I know. So you were one of the lead investigators in this? I know there were some people that described vehicles in that area. Whether or not it was Richard Allen's car, I don't know. That's not my. Go ahead and tell me who these people are. Well, Betsy Blair described a vehicle. Yeah, and a 1965 Mercury. I don't know. I don't know. You don't know that's what she described? I do know. I don't know why. Mr. McLuhan says, Judge, we're getting kind of far afield here. Betsy Blair has not testified to that at this point, and so I'm going to object to this line of questioning at this point, Judge. Okay, sustained. You found Sarah Carbow to be credible? I do. Were you in the courtroom when she testified? Yes. You thought she was credible? Yeah. She's the only person, Betsy Blair is the only one that saw a guy purportedly muddy and bloody, muddy for the first two interviews, bloody on the third. That's Sarah Carbow, not Betsy. Judge, I'm going to object. That's not what Betsy Blair testified to. Answer, not Betsy Blair. Court says sustained. Mr. Baldwin says, I'm sorry, I do that a lot where I screw up the names. Sarah Carbow. Sarah Carbow is the only person that saw this guy walking, what she says, westbound on 300 North, that in two interviews was muddy, and then in the third interview was bloody. Is that correct? Yes. So there was no other reports, like, hey, I saw, and that's not an unbusy 300 North. It's not unbusy. I mean, there's traffic on that. Judge, may I ask a few foundational questions? Court says, you may. Mr. McLeland says, are you aware of the traffic patterns in Carroll County? I am not, says the witness. Mr. McLeland says, are you aware of the traffic patterns on County Road 300 North in Carroll County? I do not. Have you done any studies as to the traffic pattern on county roads within Carroll County? No. Have you seen any reports or done any studies on the traffic patterns on County Road 300? No. Judge, I'm going to object to the form of question calls for speculation. Mr. Baldwin says, I'll withdraw. Sustained. Thank you. The Hoosier Harvest Store video, you did see the traffic patterns on that along 300 North, did you not? I did not watch the video. Huh? You are the lead, one of the lead detectives on this, right? I assigned somebody else to watch the video and then they would show me still photos. You're a lead detective on this case and you haven't seen the evidence in it. That's all that shows me. How many vehicles were traveling along the path of 300 North between noon and 4 o'clock on the 13th of February 2017? I don't know. The bridge, how tall is that bridge? I don't know. Tall. Somebody could or should measure that bridge because the claim is that these, would you agree with me, somebody should measure the height of that bridge? Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I'm going to object to the form of the question. Sustained. Oh, because I said, would you agree? And then he goes into, would you agree that it would be prudent in an investigation like this, where the girls were on the bridge, to measure the height of the bridge from the top of the bridge down to the floodplain? I think we know. I just don't know. So you don't know. Okay. Yes. Does the investigation team knows? Sure. So we're going to hear from, do you think we'll hear from somebody later on that? You might. Okay. I mean, it's not 10 or 20 feet. No, it's tall. It's 100, probably 100 feet, if I'm guessing. And when you go down, and have you been at the end of the bridge where the girls were abducted? Yes. And so when you go down that hill, if that's what happened, then you go down to the access road, right? Yes. And then that's not the end of it. If you want to get down to the creek, then you've got to go down even more. Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I'm going to object to this line of questioning. This is well outside the scope of direct. Sustained. Law enforcement believes that once Richard Allen left the scene around 3:30 or 4 p.m., he never returned to the scene. Yes. If you would, just because I think yes could be misinterpreted later on in the record, is that correct? Law enforcement believes that Richard Allen left the scene and then he never returned to the scene. Is that correct? That is correct. So, law enforcement's belief is that Richard Allen's involvement in the homicides was completed by 3:57 p.m. That's when Sarah Carball claims that she saw someone. Yes, correct. And therefore, is law enforcement's theory also that Richard Allen did not take Libby German's phone from him with him and then later bring it back? That's correct. So we know the whole, the phone probably leaving the area or being disconnected from the tower somehow and then reconnected at odd times when they say that the homicides have already occurred and Richard Allen's already home. How is that possible? And Libby German's phone helped establish the timeline that you used to find probable cause to arrest Richard Allen, correct? That's correct. Richard Allen did not sell his Ford Focus, did he, between 2017 and 2022? Not to my knowledge, no. He did not sell the gun that you say held the bullet? Nope. He did not throw the gun away? Not to my... No. He did not take clothing or hide clothing that you think he may have worn? I don't know. Okay, that's fair. And Libby's phone would give a good timeline of the events from that day on the 13th and the 14th. Would that be accurate? Yes. And you and other investigators used the info that you collected from Libby's cell phone to establish a nice timeline that you think would implicate Richard Allen. Is that correct? Approximate timeline. And the phone data is accurate? I don't know. I believe so, yes. And I just want to be clear on this. Anna Spath, Rayleigh Voorhees, that was two of four people that were on the trails together at that same time. Yes. And Richard Allen said that he saw three people on the trail when he was on the trail. Yes. Your thought at one time was Libby's phone had shut down at some point on the 13th. That's what we were told. But that ended up being incorrect. Correct? Or in, let me reread that. But that ended up being inaccurate. Correct? Yes. And you believe that one person, and one person only, was involved in this homicide? I believe that now. He didn't believe it before. He thought multiple people were involved. They are on video in press conferences in the years leading up to Richard Allen's arrest, claiming that there were multiple perpetrators in this crime because because it was because of the nature of the crime. It just appears that not one person did it. But he's completely changed his tune now that they've arrested Richard Allen. Okay. At some point in time, you thought it was multiple people? No. At some point, I thought maybe there might be more than one, but the longer it went on, because of my training and experience, usually when one person commits a crime, they don't tell anybody. And usually, if there's multiple people, one will get in trouble and tell on the others. So, if there was multiple people, I think those people probably would have gotten in trouble. And that's coming from my when I was a DES, Drug Investigative Enforcement drug inve- drug enforcement section that would happen commonly. So that's one of the reasons that I thought it was just one person. Okay, drugs and homicide are completely different, and the punishment is very different for the two, depending on the amount of drugs and whatnot. But you get my point. The sentences would be different. Punishment, everything would be different. A homicide, double homicide of two young girls that totally threw the whole county up in arms, that's going to cause, you know, an outcry from people. And it did. And unfortunately, they arrested the wrong person. Anyways, so you're equating the dealing of drugs or selling of drugs and how people might talk about that to the brutal homicide of two girls, that you think that they would still talk about that. Absolutely, if there was more than one. And I'm going to go back because I missed a thought that I was going to say right here when he says, because in my training and experience, usually when one person commits a crime, they don't tell anybody. And usually, if there's multiple people, one will get in trouble and tell on the others. You mean like when Elvis Fields told both of his sisters and one of the officers investigating the case that he was there in some form or fashion. He told an officer that what if if my DNA was on one of the girls, could I explain it away? Would I still get in trouble? And then he said to both of his sisters, he had mentioned on separate occasions about being there, about being in a brotherhood or a gang now, and yeah, and he admitted to being a participant in it. So maybe like that, when somebody tells on the others, and maybe like when Brad Holder told his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife, I think Amber, is it Amber Holder, that he was afraid of Patrick Westfall, right? and he didn't want anything to do with him. Like those kinds of instances. I don't know. Just coming up with a few off the top of my head. Anywho, what do I know? Have you seen the. I'm sorry to interrupt. The witness says, if there was more than one, yes, someone would get in trouble. And there was more than one? If there was. Oh, okay. That's your way. Well, you've seen the crime scene. I mean, you were there, seen photographs, right? I have, yes. And you believe that one person, in an hour or so, abducted two girls, brought them across the river. Somehow, clothes are changed on one body and the other's clothes are in the creek. Put sticks in an arrangement on those girls. Judge says, I would object to the question at this point. It's beyond the scope of direct. Overruled. One person did it all. Without a doubt, I believe that. Why did he not ask the question? He was going somewhere with that question. It was awesome. And then he got the objection worked because he got sidetracked. So one person did it all. Without a doubt, I believe that. It would be, would you agree with me that it would be easier for two people to do that? I don't think I would agree with you, no. Really? You're gonna say, no, it's easier for one person to take the lives of two people at once in a very short span of time. Oh, okay. Now, Libby German, you believe, based upon the evidence that you knew back then, was killed at a tree some distance, not a crazy amount of distance, but some distance from where her body ultimately was found, correct? That's what the evidence supports, yes. And there's no drag marks from the tree to where the body was ultimately found. There are drag marks, but not. I don't think you're describing the correctly, but yes, there are some drag marks, but not from the tree to where the body was found. And just the theory is that a knife was used on her at this tree, some distance from where she was found. I don't think I made that clear, correct? Yes. And then later on, the body was found in a different location. Yes. And you think that the photos will show drag marks. They're hard to see, but I think you can see she was drug a little bit, not far, just, I don't know. I don't want to say how many feet, but she was drugged next to that tree. Well, I mean, we should be able to hear some people get up and testify about this is a drag mark, here's how long it is, right? Do we have people like that are going to be testifying? I don't know. Two people could lift a body, though, and take it somewhere, and there wouldn't be any drag marks. Would you agree? Mr. McLeland says, Judge, it calls for speculation, and the court sustains that. It's really, I mean, like common sense, but okay. Tony Liggett believed that there were multiple people involved at some point in time. Judge, again, it calls for speculation. I'm going to object. Sustained. He's not really getting anywhere with this witness, is he? You had the opportunity to analyze the height of the person that was on the bridge, correct? No, we tried. The cost was $10,000 or so? I believe so. And you didn't want to spend the money. The money wasn't the issue, it was the accuracy that they said they would be able to provide that. They said they could get it within plus or minus 2 inches, right? I think so. I don't recall exactly, but so if they said we can do an analysis and this person is 6 feet tall and then it would be 5'10" to 6'2", right? Your math sounds correct to me. Yes. So variation either way. 2 inches either way. So if it was a 7-foot person, strike that. If it's a tall person, then or a short person outside of the range of normality, then that actually could work, even with a 2-inch variance. Would you agree? I don't know. And Richard Allen's a short guy, right? I don't know how tall he is. Shorter than you and I. By the time you had talked to Richard Allen on October the 26th, you knew that there was a strand of hair found in Abby Williams' right hand, right? Yes. And there was DNA that had come from the root of that hair, some of the hairs. Yes, that one. From that one? Mm-hmm. And it probably was going to be a family member. That's what you were told. We were told that it was female and familial, meaning family. Wow. So this is Kelsey's hair for sure. Kelsey's the only other person in the hair with or in the, well, no, didn't Becky Patty had longer hair at the time, but Kelsey had really long hair. Becky Patty's was like shoulder length, so if it was really long, it was probably Kelsey. And all they needed was Kelsey German or Becky Patty's DNA swab as to compare it to see if it was, in fact, a family member's. They had their DNA. They had it? Mm-hmm. But you guys didn't ask for it to be tested until last week. Yeah, we chose not to because of the time and resources. We wanted it to be used in other areas. At that time, we had no family female suspects, so we chose not to test it at that time. But you were also told that it may not be a family member, but they think that it is. But it may not be? I don't know if they ever said that it may not be. I just think they told us that they believed it was. Rick's DNA was not found on the crime scene. No, it was not. Neither of the girls' DNA was found at Rick's home. No. Or in his car. No. Bloody sticks were left behind at the crime scene and collected a number of days later. You heard that testimony? I did. That's a mistake. No, it's not a mistake. I don't think it's a mistake. So it's acceptable to leave bloody sticks behind rather than gather them as evidence. I think they tested them and observed them, as you've heard testimony, and then they decided to leave them. And then when DNR saw them, they thought, and then that's why they went back and got them. So you didn't take them the first time, and then somebody else said, oh, we should have them because it's probably valuable evidence. So that would be a mistake, in my opinion, that they didn't take it the first time. So you were in this courtroom when Chris Cecil testified, weren't you? Yes. And he had made several mistakes that he noted, including transposing 2 digits on the screen. You remember that? He did make mistakes. He did make mistakes. You know if Dan Doolin transposed any digits when he typed in from his notes and put it into the computer? I do not know that. Well, there's been mistakes made in this case, hasn't there? There's been mistakes. Yes. May I approach briefly with a quick sidebar? Mr. Baldwin says, I don't know if I'm sorry to do this. I just didn't know if this was objectionable. You can read it. Or a violation of Mr. McLuhan says, I don't know how definitely not this one, because you're opening the door. You can ask inaudible. This is part of the motion in limine, your motion in limine. Mr. Baldwin says, right. Mr. McLuhan says, that would be opening. I think you opened the door with Olahi. But my objection to it is you can't open the door and then say, okay, well, all this stuff comes in. And I get it that you're trying to elicit through him. He's going to say, yes, he was trying to hide it. But my issue is that you're using it later to try to get this stuff in because you said the door was opened. The court says, I mean, is that his belief? Mr. McLeland says, are you? Mr. Baldwin says, yes. Court says that there's no pattern. McClellan says, right. The court says, on the evidence found here. Mr. McClellan says, right. Court says, so these are fine. I would stay away from C as this kind of implies. Mr. Baldwin says, I apologize for having to do that. I just wanted to clarify. The court says, no, it's fine. Sidebar conference concluded. You may proceed, says the court. Baldwin says, thank you, Judge. I want to talk about the sticks on the girls. Okay. You believe that the perpetrator was just trying to cover the girls to conceal the bodies so nobody would see them. Camouflage. Yes. Camouflage. You don't believe there was a pattern on Abby Williams at all? No. It's random? Yes. And the perpetrator, therefore, you must believe, took the time to lay one stick on Abby Williams, another stick on Abby Williams, and a third stick on Abby Williams. Correct. And you don't believe that the bodies were posed or positioned? No, I don't. There's no fingerprints at the scene of anybody. No. Libby's hands had blood on them, but Abby's Williams had no blood on them. Is that correct? Correct. We're not too far from being done here. From where the crime, and this has been testified to a number of times, you sat in the courtroom, but from where the crime scene is located, you can definitely hear people on the bridge. If you're, Mr. McClellan says, I'm going to object to that, Judge. It calls for speculation. Sustained. One of your theories is that Richard Allen heard people on the bridge in the search party and then took the girls' lives and then left. Could you repeat that? Sure. Do you think, that Richard Allen, the perpetrator, will call them that whoever took the girls' lives heard people on the bridge from the search party, took the girls' lives, and then left? I'm not sure about the order, but I believe that he, at some point, may have could have heard somebody and left after. After he took their lives, before he took their lives, I don't know what he heard. But you thought it was the search party before, right? You remember being family members or search party, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, so you think that the killer was still in the process of doing whatever they were doing at the time that the search party started? No, I don't think I'd actually recall. I don't know for sure. I don't know. Your deposition help if I to refresh? No, no. I just don't, sitting here today, I don't know if that's just a theory. I don't know. Okay. Every time, every time every time Andy Baldwin tries to refresh Lieutenant Holman's memory with something, he says no. He doesn't want to see it. He doesn't want it to be refreshed. It's not going to refresh his memory if he looks at it, which is a total tactic of people who are being deceptive because they don't want their words thrown back in their face. Okay. Because that search party didn't get there until 4:30 or so, right? It was family members got there earlier than that. That's what I was referring to as the search party as well, because they were part of the search. Right, but even they didn't get there until 4:30. Some of them got there earlier than that. Well, you're saying that the perpetrator was gone by 3:57, right? Yes. The search party had not started at that time. Family members were arriving pretty close to that. You are the lead investigator in this, correct? That is not, yes. That's not an accurate statement. That's not a question either. The father was yelling for them, and he got at 3:57? Before that. Derek German got there before that. You had no concerns that Betsy Blair provided an inaccurate description of the person she observed from 50 feet away. No. Nor Sarah Carbow? No. The video, you don't see who says down the hill. No. Okay. And that the view from Libby German's phone on her phone doesn't show as you're getting off the bridge and now you're going down the hill and there's this right side and there's the left side. And I think you think that they went down on the right side, correct? That was a lot of questions. Yeah. Yes, I do think that they went down to the right side. The right side. Yeah. You don't know if somebody went on the left side saying girls down the hill, do you? I don't know if anybody was over there, no. And you don't know who said down the hill. I believe it was the person in the video, yes. But that's not, you're not saying that it's Richard Allen because nobody has ID'd Richard Allen as the guy in the video yet or ever. Like, to this day, they have not. Was there ever any discussion in the law enforcement who were handling this investigation that there could have been two people down at that end of the bridge? Yes. You can't rule out that there weren't two people down at that. We didn't find anything indicating that there was more than one person down there. Did you talk to Teresa Liebert? I didn't, but I know her and her husband were spoken to. Do you know whether they saw anybody that day? I don't think we're I don't think where you're describing, but I may be wrong. This is interesting. There was tension between the FBI and Unified Command, correct? No. Judge, I'm going to object to relevance. Sustained. Did you say no? I've sustained the objection. Baldwin says, okay. I really want to know more about this tension between the FBI and Unified Command because, as you know, Unified Command kicked the FBI off this case. So I'm hoping that the FBI got a little suspicious of that and was like, let's keep an eye on them. And maybe they're doing their own investigation of Unified Command, but I don't have my hopes up. So, but um, that would be the silver lining to this whole case because we really need a silver lining because it's awful. Because not only do we have two young girls who are victims, but now we have an innocent man who's been victimized by the judicial system as well. As part of your investigation and how you came up with probable cause, you were aware that the last time Abby Williams' phone connected with the tower was 5:44 p.m. on February 13th. Abby Williams didn't have a phone. I'm sorry, there I go again. I apologize. You were aware as part of your investigation and before you made probable cause to arrest Richard Allen that the last time that Libby German's phone connected with the tower was 5:44 p.m. on February 13th. Judge, perhaps a foundational question, says Mr. McLeland, and Judge says yes. Are you aware of the information from this day? Are you aware of the information, or do you have information on when her phone last connected to the tower? No. Judge, I don't think he's not in a position to answer that question. I'll object to the question. Mr. Baldwin says, but he testified under oath in a deposition that he did know the answer to that question. Court says, well, then you need to confront him with that deposition. Overruled. Sir, do you remember taking a deposition with me August the 10th, 2023? Yes. What's your recollection in answering that question? Yes. There's a lot of stuff here. Page 24. Is it okay, Nick, if I just give him half of this? I'm not trying to hide anything. It's about his something something because it's inaudible. Mr. McLeland says, Mr. Baldwin, I'm not the one that runs that courtroom. That's up to the judge. Mr. Baldwin says, oh. So I appreciate you asking me, but I'm not the goalkeeper here or the referee. Mr. Baldwin says, that is a fact. Judge, may I just give him half of this? Court says, that's fine. Mr. Baldwin says, I appreciate it. Thank you. What a kiss ass Nick McLeland is, by the way, from that answer. Just what a kiss ass. What page? I apologize for that, Judge. Page 20, page 24, line 15 to 24. McClellan says, Mr. Baldwin, can you say the lines again for me? 15 through 24. Thank you. And what was the date of that? I believe it was the August 10th, because I just looked at that. Page 24, which line, sir? Says the witness. I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong one. So you remember taking a deposition May 3rd of this year. Oh, so not this one? You remember that? I do. You swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I did. Thank you. It's page 24, line 15 through 24 on the May deposition. Tell me when you're done and let me know if that refreshes your recollection. Okay. Does that refresh your recollection? It does. And Libby's phone last connected to the tower on the 13th at 5:54 p.m., correct? Looks like you asked about a ping, or can you, I guess that's what you mean by connecting? Yes. Okay, yes. You can't rule out from the evidence that you have that the girls and Libby's phone left the area on the 13th and then returned early morning hours of the 14th. I think we can rule that out. How? So, how, sir? When you've got towers connecting at weird hours when they're supposedly just already laying there in the at the crime scene, they should have already been there, and the phone shouldn't have moved. But yet we have movement and actions on the phone. Okay. I mean, you have talked to Detective Chris Cecil. You testified about the points of data on that phone? Yes. All right. These are questions that I think have been answered, so I apologize. Kelsey German's phone was never analyzed to determine if it could be of some assistance in the timeline. Is that correct? I don't recall it ever being downloaded, but I believe we looked at it. Okay, but it was never extracted like 101 other phones did. Like 101 other phones did. I believe that's correct. Okay. You should have extracted Kelsey German's phone just to see if it could have been some assistance before you found probable cause for Richard Allen. Are you telling me or asking? I'm asking you. No. So no, you shouldn't have? Okay. So you don't think it was an error not to dump that phone? I don't think it was an error. No. Okay. Nothing to your strike that. Your conversations with Chris Cecil about the forensic data on that phone, nothing contradicts your theory that you know of, that Libby German's phone was under Abby Williams' body from around 3:30 p.m. on the 13th until the bodies were found at noon or so on the 14th. There's nothing that contradicts that you know of. That phone stayed there that entire time? That's what I believe the information says. Yes. Those are bad questions. I'll just weed these out and be done. You didn't learn that until very recently, in the last few months, that the phone reconnected to the tower at 4:30 a.m. on the 14th, did you? That was new information to you? I think I knew. I just forgot about it. Yeah. Okay. I think you refreshed my memory. Okay. That's all. No other questions. Thank you. Appreciate it. That was not great for the defense, to be honest, if you ask me. I think there was a lot of weakness in that um, cross-examination and some errors made by Baldwin, especially since this is the lead investigator. It's disappointing to see. All right, so redirect begins with Lieutenant Holman, and Mr. McClellan will be doing the questioning. Lieutenant Holman, I think Mr. Baldwin mischaracterized some of the evidence, and I want to clear up some of that for the jury. Mr. Baldwin had said that you believe all this happened within an hour. My understanding is the information you got from the phone was the video was taken, the video that Libby German took was taken at what time? The video was 2:13, I believe, through the phone. And Sarah Carbal's testimony was she saw someone on the road just before 4 o'clock? Yes. So that's more like 2 hours instead of 1 hour, correct? Yes. Okay. And the phone on the video, or I've got that backwards. The video on the phone of Libby German shows the abduction of the girls, correct? Yes. It shows nothing. You also observed the video from Libby German's phone, correct? I have. And your belief is the voice on the video is the voice of Bridge Guy. I do. And when I say Bridge Guy, do you know who I'm referring to? Yes. And was there anything that you found within the investigation that indicated another male individual or individuals at the end of the bridge on that day? No. You also talked about Betsy Blair and Sarah Carball, correct? I did. You understand they both identified a person they saw, right? Yes. And do you know whether or not they identified the person they saw as Bridge Guy? Yes, they did. And so, in their testimony or in their description, do they confirm that who they saw was Bridge Guy? Yes. Both of them? Yes. Okay. Um, Richard Allen, Mr. Baldwin, characterized the people that Richard Allen saw on the trail as people. In fact, he didn't characterize them at all, did he? No. He characterized them as girls. Yes, he did. Correct? Yes. The sticks in the body, you believe they were there as camouflage or to hide the bodies. Is that correct? They didn't hide anything. That's my belief. You also had information they may have been there for an undoing. Is that correct? That is correct. Mr. Baldwin asked you about connecting to the tower at 5. Was there more information about that? What is an undoing? What? We're just gonna glaze over that and not explain that? Okay. Mr. Baldwin asked you about connecting to the tower at 5:44 p.m. I don't know if the jury heard it, and I want to make sure I heard it correct. From your deposition, the 5:40 p.m. time, what does that indicate? At that time, we were told that was the time that that was the time that had any interaction that maybe it was turned off or powered down at that time. But you used a different word in your deposition when you were questioned. Did you talk about pings? Pings. Okay. Was there any indication from the investigation that after the video, the girls were put in a vehicle and taken to another location? Absolutely not. Was there any indication that after after the phone stopped moving at 2:32 that it moved again? Absolutely not. Was there any indication in the phone data that it moved again? No. One final question, Lieutenant Holman. I think at the beginning of Mr. Baldwin's cross, you talked about some of the lies that you told Richard Allen during the interview with him. Is that correct? It is correct. And Mr. Baldwin grouped it there. It was a lie that other people saw him on the trail. Was that, in fact, a lie? No, that was not a lie. So that portion of it, you were not lying about. Correct. You had information when you interviewed other people on the trail had seen him. I did. I don't have any other questions, Judge. But nobody actually described Richard Allen. They described people that did not look like Richard Allen at all. Yet he's having them equate it to Bridge Guy, but no one has said Richard Allen is Bridge Guy. Do you see the problem? Yet that's what this jury inferred. because they allowed it. This judge allowed it. And I honestly can't believe that the jury bought this load of crap. But let's move on to recross. Mr. Baldwin questioning Lieutenant Jerry Holman. You're the one that told me that you lied about seeing people on the trail. I didn't ask you that question. I was confused. What I said was that there were eyewitnesses that saw him and identified him, but he said he saw three girls, and there were actually four, and they did all see him as well. It couldn't be that he was there an hour or two earlier and ran into three different girls, could it? I don't think so. All right. No other questions. That's it. Okay. The court says, all right, does anybody on the jury have any questions for Lieutenant Holman? Yes. Okay. All right. So we've got some questions from the jurors. We're going to go into a sidebar conference as usual. They discuss them before they actually read them out to the witness. Mr. Baldwin says, sorry. The court says, you're fine, you're fine. This way they can't read our lips. Is there a way to get to where the girls were when encountered by Bridge Guy without crossing the bridge? McClellan says, okay. Baldwin says, yeah. Court says, do you know where Derek German was when he was shouting for the girls? That's fine. Mr. Baldwin says, if he knows. The court says, do you want me to couch it if you know? Okay. Sidebar conference concluded. So only two questions here. Now, this is in front of the jurors and the rest of the in the audience, the gallery there. Lieutenant, is there a way to get to where the girls were when encountered by Bridge Guy without crossing the bridge? Not an improved way. There's an unimproved way. They would have had to go through some fields and to come in the back way, but possibly. Mr. McClelland, you've been able to observe the video? Yes. Correct? Yes. On the video, where is Abby Williams? On the bridge. And where's Bridge Guy? Behind Abby Williams on the bridge. And you saw where he's positioned on the bridge in the video? Yes. To get in that spot, would he have had to have gone on the bridge from one of the ends? Yes. There's no other way to get to the middle of the bridge besides starting either at one end or the other. That's correct. And in the beginning of the video, both Abby Williams and Bridge Guy are on the bridge. That's correct. And where is the perspective of the video? Where is Libby German? At the end, one of the ends. And you know she's at the end because, well, how do you know she's at the end? You can see gravel on the ground and not railroad ties. And so for Bridge Guy to get where he is at the video, common sense tells you that he had to have started where? Common sense would say he started at the beginning of the trail and at the beginning of the railway. Otherwise, he would have had to walk past Libby German, past Abby Williams, turned around and come back. That's correct. Okay. Court says, Mr. Baldwin? He says, sorry. Yeah, I don't have any other questions, Judge. Next question. We intend to put into evidence, and I think we've seen it here on other occasions, the photo of 207 of Abby Williams walking down the bridge, correct? I have. And that's what is this? Oh, wait, okay, he does have questions. Sorry. So, questions from Mr. Baldwin. He said he didn't have any follow up, and then he says, we intend to put into evidence, and I think we've seen it here on other occasions, the photo of at 207 of Abby Williams walking down the bridge, correct? That's just her by herself. I have. And they were going that way, right? Down to the south end of the bridge where they were abducted? Yeah, yes. The photo was taken that way, as Abby headed to the south of the end of the bridge, correct? If my directions are correct, yes, I believe so. And I wish I had it with me, but when you look at that photograph taken at 2:07, there is nobody behind her, is there? No. Okay, so why is it so preposterous? We'll strike that. Do you find it to be preposterous that somebody did, as McLeland said, might have been the case, walked past the girls and then turned around? Possibility. And the guy on the video, he's not huffing and puffing, is he? I can't tell. Yeah, that's all. Thank you. Next question. If you know, do you know where Derek German was when he was shouting for the girls? I don't know where exactly, but from where he described, he would have been down when you first come into the exit, down in that area towards by the river or creek. At some point, I think he went towards the bridge and more people started yelling, but I don't know exactly where he was. Mr. McClelland? I don't have any questions, Judge. Thank you. Mr. Baldwin? No, Your Honor, thank you. All right, thank you, Lieutenant. You may step down. Yes, Judge, says Mr. McClelland. The court says, all right, so ladies and gentlemen, before you arrived, both parties had a discussion about the next witness who's going to be very lengthy, and rather than keep you here until about 2 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and break a little bit early. Again, excuse me, while you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything, as you will have access to your phones for purposes of contacting your family and your work emails, always under the supervision of the bailiffs. Please don't talk about the case. Please have a safe and peaceful weekend, and we'll see you Monday morning. Gentlemen, all rise, says the bailiff. The jury leaves the courtroom. The court says, you may be seated. Okay, is there anything that, excuse me, is there anything that we need to talk about before we call it a day ourselves? Mr. McClelland? He says, no, Your Honor, thank you. Mr. Rosie? No, ma'am. Okay, thank you very much. And again, folks, if you just sit tight for a few minutes while we get the jury out, I would appreciate it. And yes, you can take Mr. Allen. Okay. And they go off the record. And that's where we're going to go off the record too. So, thank you guys for sticking with me for Jerry Holman's testimony. He's a lying liar who lies, and I think it wasn't really good testimony for the defense. I don't think Baldwin got as far with him as he could have or should have, because there's plenty of evidence that Baldwin could have gotten into, but they're not letting him get into it. Also, this isn't going to be the last time that Holman's going to be on the stand, as you know. Well, as we've seen so far with Nick's presentation of the evidence, he puts people on, like he's going in an order, a chronological order of the case. So he might bring someone in at different times, but for brief periods. So he might even bring Holman in again, but I doubt it at this point because he's pretty much given his, I arrested Richard Allen spiel. So that's probably all we'll hear from him in the state's case. But we're definitely, well, not definitely. It's been suggested that the defense may call him in their case to get some more evidence in that the state didn't want them to get into on their direct examination. So we'll see what happens if Holman comes back. So the next witness is somebody named Stacy Bozanovsky. And I'm not exactly sure who she is, but she's going to be on the stand for quite some time. And where is she? So what does she do? Oh, she's a forensic scientist. And she performed the serological examination of evidentiary items. So she's a lab tech, and she did all the items, I guess. She looked for DNA, body fluids. She's going to go through all the different items and say what she found. So she's going to be on the stand for a while. So just letting you know. So that's what you have to look forward to next. I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button. See you guys tomorrow. Take care.